Have you ever noticed how the harder you chase after something, the more elusive it becomes? Ambitious people frequently fall into this paradoxical cycle, believing that relentless pursuit is the key to success, only to find opportunities retreating, leaving them frustrated and burned out. This is no accident. As you'll soon discover, chasing creates scarcity, and scarcity repels the very success you're after. In Stop Chasing, Everything Wants You When You Want Nothing, we'll explore the profound shift from frantic pursuit to effortless attraction. You'll uncover the hidden dynamics, the backwards law of effort, that explain why desperation repels and composure attracts. More importantly, you'll learn actionable strategies to stop signaling scarcity, cultivate genuine self-sufficiency, and adopt the calm, magnetic presence of someone who effortlessly draws opportunities toward them. Through concepts such as developing your enoughness baseline, mastering non-attachment, embracing effortless action, and maintaining a chooser's frame, you'll discover a radically different approach to achieving your goals. You'll come to understand why doing less, but doing it strategically and calmly, can dramatically amplify your results. If you're tired of chasing everything and feeling like you're getting nowhere, you're exactly where you need to be. This book offers not only insight, but a practical blueprint to reclaim your energy, your confidence, and your influence. It's time to stop chasing success and start letting success chase you. Ready to discover how stepping back can propel you forward? Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Switch. Your calendar is packed, your inbox overflows, and you're working harder than ever, yet the results keep slipping away like water through your fingers. The promotion goes to someone else. The client chooses your competitor. The partnership stalls indefinitely. You're doing everything right, following every productivity hack and hustle gospel, but somehow, the harder you chase, the further everything retreats. This isn't a coincidence. It's physics. Welcome to the most counterintuitive truth in business and life. The harder you grasp, the less you hold. The more desperately you want something, the more it senses your need and pulls away. You've been caught in the backwards law of effort, where force creates friction, pressure breeds resistance, and neediness becomes the invisible tax on everything you touch. But what if I told you there's another way? A path where calm becomes your competitive advantage, where sufficiency signals strength, and where the right opportunities begin moving toward you instead of away. This book will teach you to flip the script from push to pull, from chasing to choosing, from grasping to grounded. The invisible prison of pursuit. Most ambitious people are trapped in a cycle they don't even recognize. You wake up optimizing for outcomes, checking metrics, chasing responses, measuring worth by external validation. Every interaction becomes an audition. Every conversation carries the weight of proving yourself. Every delay feels like rejection. The microsignals leak everywhere. Your voice gets slightly higher when you really want something. Your emails grow longer, more apologetic, stuffed with qualifiers. You follow up too quickly, explain too much, promise too eagerly. These aren't character flaws. They're natural human responses to scarcity. But they broadcast exactly what you're trying to hide, that you need this more than they do. Consider Sarah, a talented consultant who built a six-figure practice by being the person who always said yes. She answered emails within minutes, took calls at all hours, and bent over backward to accommodate every client request. Her calendar was full, but her margins were thin. Clients sensed her availability as desperation and negotiated accordingly. She was busy, but not profitable, visible, but not valuable. The cost compounds in ways you don't expect. Your attention scatters across a dozen urgent priorities, leaving no bandwidth for the deep work that actually builds assets. You make concessions on price, scope, timeline that seem small in the moment but erode your position over time. Your reputation shifts from reliable expert to eager vendor. The market learns to push your boundaries because you've never held them firm. This is the scarcity signaling trap. The very behaviors you think demonstrate commitment actually communicate desperation. The market responds by offering you less, not more. The compound cost of chasing. What happens when you continue down this path? The downside compounds like interest in reverse. Your optionality shrinks. When you're always available, always accommodating, always chasing the next opportunity, you train the world to see you as a backup plan. Premium partners, the ones with real budgets and clear timelines, start looking elsewhere. They want to work with people who are selective, not desperate. Your stress becomes your baseline. The constant state of on rewires your nervous system. Creativity dies under pressure. Charm evaporates under strain. You become reactive instead of responsive, tactical instead of strategic. The very qualities that made you valuable in the first place, your insight, your presence, your ability to see the bigger picture, get buried under the noise of constant urgency. Take Marcus, a software founder who spent 3 years in perpetual pitch mode. Every conversation was a potential investor meeting. Every coffee was a networking opportunity. He optimized his entire life around being discoverable and available. The result? Burnout, a stalled company, and a reputation as someone who talked more than he built. When he finally landed funding, it was at a fraction of his company's potential value because investors sensed his desperation. The identity erosion is perhaps the cruelest cost. When your worth becomes tethered to external metrics, revenue spikes, social media engagement, other people's approval, your mood becomes a hostage to forces you can't control. Good months feel like validation. Bad months feel like evidence that you're not enough. You stop taking principled risks because you can't afford another no. The breaking point. If you don't change course, the trajectory is predictable. Burnout masquerades as ambition until your body forces the conversation. Sleep debt accumulates. Irritability becomes your default. Focus fragments into 1,000 shallow tasks that feel urgent but move nothing meaningful forward. Your concessions escalate. You overpromise to win deals, then underdeliver because you're stretched too thin. You underprice to beat competitors, then resent the work because it doesn't pay what it's worth. You rush delivery to please impatient clients, then deal with quality issues that damage your reputation. The reputational drag becomes a death spiral. Fewer referrals, slower responses, doors that close quietly without explanation. You become the person others call when their first choice isn't available. Your name becomes associated with eager instead of excellent. But here's what most people miss. This isn't a character flaw. It's a systems problem, and systems can be changed. The Promise of Pull. This book will teach you to install a different operating system. One where calm becomes your currency, where boundaries become your brand, and where the right opportunities begin seeking you out instead of the other way around. You'll learn to build what I call an enoughness baseline, a self-sourced sense of worth that doesn't fluctuate with market conditions. When you're enough in your own eyes, you stop auditioning for others. When you stop auditioning, you start selecting. When you start selecting, everything changes. Through the principles of effortless action, you'll discover how to do less but accomplish more. Instead of grinding through 12-hour days, you'll design a sustainable rhythm that protects your best thinking while consistently shipping value. Your reputation will shift from always available to worth the wait. The chooser's frame will teach you to flip power dynamics in your favor. Instead of hoping someone picks you, you'll develop the posture and options that let you pick them. This isn't about arrogance, it's about abundance. When you have real alternatives, you negotiate from strength, not fear. But perhaps most importantly, you'll master what I call Desire Alchemy, the art of transmuting wanting into creating. Instead of chasing opportunities, you'll build assets that attract them. Instead of begging for attention, you'll earn it through consistent value. Instead of pushing your way into rooms, you'll become the room others want to enter. The path forward. The journey from push to pull isn't about becoming passive or indifferent. It's about becoming strategic. It's about understanding that in a world full of noise, clarity is magnetic. In a market full of desperation, calm is compelling. In a culture that rewards the loudest voice, the steadiest presence wins. The winners in this game, the consultants who charge premium rates, the founders who attract top talent, the leaders who build lasting influence, all share certain characteristics. They're calm under pressure. They're selective about opportunities. They think in longer time horizons. They build assets instead of just working in their business. They say no as often as they say yes, and they do both with grace. The losers, meanwhile, are trapped in reactive mode. They chase every shiny object. They burn bridges in pursuit of shortcuts. They measure effort instead of impact. They're always on, but rarely effective. They confuse motion with progress and busyness with value. The choice is yours, and you make it fresh every day. Every promise you keep to yourself builds identity. Every clear boundary you hold signals value. Every asset you ship instead of ask you send invites the world to come to you. The switch from push to pull isn't just a business strategy, it's a way of being, and once you make it, you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. But the real transformation happens when you discover something unexpected. The very qualities that make you magnetic in business, the calm presence, the clear boundaries, the generous spirit, also make you magnetic in life. Your relationships deepen, your stress decreases, your days feel spacious instead of squeezed. The path ahead isn't about working harder or wanting more. It's about wanting less and attracting more. It's about becoming the kind of person others seek out, not because you're perfect, but because you're grounded. Because in a world of chaos, you've learned to be the calm in the storm. And that calm, it's about to become your greatest competitive advantage. But first, we need to understand exactly why force creates friction, and how the very act of trying too hard might be the one thing standing between you and everything you want. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Backwards Law. There's a peculiar phenomenon in physics where applying more force actually reduces your grip. Try squeezing a wet bar of soap with increasing pressure. The harder you clench, the faster it shoots from your hands. The same principle governs human behavior, business relationships, and every outcome you desperately want to control. This is the backwards law of effort, and it's been quietly sabotaging your success for years. Most people discover this law the hard way. They send increasingly urgent follow-up emails that get ignored. They negotiate harder and watch deals evaporate. They chase opportunities with mounting intensity, only to see them slip away like that bar of soap. The cruel irony? The very effort meant to secure the outcome becomes the force that repels it. But here's what's fascinating. Once you understand this law, you can flip it to your advantage. The same mechanism that pushes opportunities away when you grasp can pull them toward you when you release. The question isn't whether this law applies to you, it's whether you'll learn to work with it or against it. The friction engine. Every interaction carries an invisible friction coefficient. When you approach someone with need radiating from your pores, you're essentially cranking up the resistance. The other person feels it immediately, even if they can't articulate why. Their nervous system registers your tension and mirrors it back with caution, delay, or outright avoidance. Think about the last time someone desperately wanted something from you. Maybe it was a salesperson who called 3 times in one day, or a colleague who kept just checking in on a project. How did their urgency make you feel? Probably pressured, suspicious, or simply annoyed. You likely found reasons to delay your response or avoid the interaction altogether. This isn't personal, it's biological. Humans are wired to resist pressure and move away from desperation. When someone needs us more than we need them, the power dynamic shifts, and not in their favor. We unconsciously devalue what's being offered because the very act of chasing signals that it might not be worth much. The friction compounds in ways you don't expect. Your language becomes more apologetic. Your timelines get more aggressive. Your proposals grow longer as you try to overcome objections that haven't even been raised. Each escalation creates more resistance, which triggers more effort, which creates more resistance. It's a death spiral disguised as persistence. Warren Buffett understood this principle when he built Berkshire Hathaway. Instead of chasing deals, he created conditions that made great opportunities come to him. He set clear criteria, communicated them publicly, and then waited. Companies began approaching Berkshire because they knew exactly what he wanted and trusted that he wouldn't waste their time with games or pressure tactics. The scarcity broadcasting system. Your neediness has its own communication channel, and it's broadcasting 24/7. The signals leak through micro-expressions, word choices, response times, and energy levels. You might think you're being professional, but your desperation is writing checks your composure can't cash. Consider how your language shifts when you really want something. I hope this finds you well becomes, I hope this finds you well, and I'm really excited about the possibility of working together, and I think this could be a great fit, and I'd love to hear your thoughts when you have a chance. The sentence structure itself reveals your anxiety. Your timing tells the same story, the instant response to every message, the follow-up that comes too soon, the just wanted to circle back emails that arrive with clockwork predictability. Each one broadcasts the same message, I need this more than you do. Even your availability signals scarcity. When you're always free for a call, always ready to adjust your schedule, always willing to accommodate their timeline, you're inadvertently communicating that you don't have better options. The market interprets this as low demand, which translates to low value. The most successful people I know have learned to do the opposite. They respond thoughtfully rather than immediately. They offer specific windows rather than open availability. They communicate interest without desperation, care without clinging. Their signals say, I'm interested in the right fit, and I'm patient enough to find it. The hustle mythology. Our culture has built an entire mythology around the idea that wanting something more intensely will help you get it. Hustle harder, outwork everyone, show them how badly you want it. This advice isn't just wrong, it's counterproductive. Hustle without leverage is just noise. When you're grinding 80-hour weeks but building no assets, creating no systems, developing no unique advantages, you're essentially running on a treadmill. Lots of motion, zero progress. The market doesn't reward effort, it rewards value, and value comes from clarity, not chaos. The most dangerous part of hustle culture is how it conflates activity with achievement. You feel productive because you're busy, but busy doesn't equal effective. Sending 50 cold emails feels like progress until you realize that one thoughtful piece of content could have attracted better prospects with zero effort. Patience paired with asset creation beats frantic activity every time. While others are chasing, you're building. While they're asking, you're shipping. While they're explaining why they're great, you're demonstrating it through consistent value delivery. The compound effect of this approach is staggering. Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, exemplifies this principle. Instead of aggressively pursuing every networking opportunity, he focused on creating value for his network first. He made introductions, shared insights, and helped others succeed without keeping score. The result? When he needed support for LinkedIn, his network rallied around him because he'd already proven his value. The repetition trap. There's a persistent myth that asking again proves commitment. In reality, repetition without value signals insecurity. When you follow up for the third time with no new information, no additional value, and no changed circumstances, you're essentially saying, I have nothing better to do than bother you. One useful contribution beats 5 nudges every time. Instead of sending another just checking in message, create something helpful. Write a brief analysis of their industry. Share a relevant case study. Introduce them to someone valuable. Make each interaction a gift, not a grab. Silence can be strategic. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Let the space breathe. Allow them to miss your presence instead of resenting your persistence. When you're constantly in someone's inbox, you train them to ignore you. When you're occasionally present with something valuable, you train them to pay attention. The best salespeople understand this intuitively. They don't chase. They create conditions for being chased. They build reputation through consistent value delivery. They become known for solving specific problems exceptionally well. When prospects are ready, they know exactly who to call. The inversion practice. Breaking free from the backwards law requires conscious inversion. Instead of asking, "How can I get what I want?" start asking, "How can I become the kind of person others want to work with?" The shift is subtle, but profound. Begin by auditing your own neediness signals. Record yourself on a sales call or have a trusted colleague review your recent emails. Look for the tells: over-explaining, excessive enthusiasm, apologetic language, rushed timelines. These aren't character flaws, they're simply habits that can be changed. Create what I call a push-pull ledger. For 1 week, track every interaction as either a push, asking for something, or a pull, offering something valuable. Most people discover they're pushing far more than they're pulling. The goal is to flip this ratio to at least 3 pulls for every push. Implement the 72-hour rule for any high-emotion outreach. When you feel the urge to send that urgent follow-up, that passionate pitch, that time-sensitive proposal, write it, then wait. Come back to it in 72 hours and read it with fresh eyes. You'll be amazed how different it sounds when your emotional state has settled. Replace pressure language with preference language. Instead of "I need to hear back by Friday," try, "If this aligns with your priorities, I'd love to connect by Friday." Instead of "This is a limited time offer," try, "I'm exploring this with a few select partners." The meaning is similar, but the energy is completely different. The compound returns of calm. When you stop chasing, something magical happens. Your energy shifts from desperate to selective. Your language becomes cleaner. Your timing improves. People start approaching you instead of avoiding you. The very outcomes you were grasping for begin flowing towards you naturally. Your reputation evolves from eager vendor to trusted advisor. Clients start referring you to their networks. Partners begin pitching you instead of the other way around. Opportunities arrive with better terms because you're no longer negotiating from desperation. The psychological benefits compound just as powerfully. Your stress levels drop because you're no longer attached to outcomes you can't control. Your creativity returns because your mind isn't consumed with anxiety about the next deal. Your relationships deepen because people feel safe around your calm presence. But perhaps most importantly, you reclaim your time and attention. Instead of spending hours crafting the perfect follow-up email, you invest that energy in building assets that work for you around the clock. Instead of chasing individual prospects, you create systems that attract ideal clients consistently. The backwards law isn't just a business principle, it's a life philosophy. When you stop grasping for happiness, you become more content. When you stop chasing approval, you become more confident. When you stop forcing outcomes, you become more effective. The path forward requires patience, but not passivity. It demands strategy, not surrender. You'll need to build something most people never develop, a foundation so solid that you can afford to let opportunities walk away. And that foundation? It starts with understanding that your worth isn't determined by external validation, but by something far more reliable and powerful. Chapter 3, Enoughness. There's a quiet confidence that radiates from certain people, not the loud, performative kind that screams for attention, but something deeper. You've felt it when you've met them. They don't need to prove anything. They don't chase validation or fish for compliments. They seem genuinely okay with themselves, regardless of what's happening around them. This isn't arrogance or indifference. It's something far more powerful and infinitely more attractive. It's what I call enoughness, a self-sourced sense of worth that doesn't fluctuate with market conditions, social media metrics, or other people's opinions. Most people spend their entire lives outsourcing their self-worth to external scorecards, revenue numbers, follower counts, other people's approval. The problem with this approach isn't just that it's exhausting, it's that it makes you fundamentally unreliable. When your confidence swings with your circumstances, everyone around you feels that instability. And instability repels opportunity. But here's what's fascinating. The moment you stop needing external validation, you become infinitely more likely to receive it. When you're enough in your own eyes, others can't help but see you the same way. The volatility tax. Your emotional state is a signal that broadcasts constantly. When your mood depends on external metrics, whether you got the client, made the sale, received the praise, you're essentially handing control of your nervous system to forces you can't control. The result is a kind of emotional volatility that people can sense from across the room. Think about the last time you interacted with someone whose confidence seemed to depend entirely on how things were going for them. Maybe they were riding high after a big win, or deflated after a setback. How did that feel? Probably exhausting. You found yourself managing their emotional state instead of focusing on the actual conversation. This volatility creates what I call the reliability tax. When people can't predict your emotional baseline, they start treating you as a higher risk option. They hedge their bets. They keep backup plans. They approach you with caution because they never know which version of you they're going to get. The most successful people I know have learned to decouple their identity from their outcomes. They care deeply about results, but their sense of self doesn't rise and fall with quarterly numbers. This stability becomes a competitive advantage because it allows them to make better decisions under pressure, maintain stronger relationships during difficult periods, and attract opportunities that require long-term thinking. Warren Buffett exemplifies this principle. His investment philosophy is built on the foundation of emotional stability. He doesn't get euphoric during bull markets or panicked during crashes. This consistency of temperament has allowed him to make contrarian bets that less stable investors couldn't stomach. His calm becomes his edge. The internal scorecard revolution. The secret to building enoughness lies in creating what I call an internal scorecard, a daily measurement system that you control completely. Instead of tying your worth to external metrics that fluctuate wildly, you anchor it to something far more reliable: kept promises to yourself. This isn't about positive thinking or affirmations. It's about building a track record of integrity with yourself through small, daily actions. When you promise yourself you'll do something and then follow through, you're making a deposit in your self-respect account. When you break those promises, you're making a withdrawal. The beauty of this system is its simplicity. You don't need anyone else's permission or approval. You don't need perfect circumstances or ideal timing. You just need the discipline to make small promises and keep them consistently. Start ridiculously small. Promise yourself you'll write one paragraph. Promise yourself you'll make one important phone call. Promise yourself you'll spend 10 minutes organizing your workspace. The size of the promise matters less than the consistency of keeping it. What happens over time is remarkable. Your confidence begins to shift from external validation to internal validation. Instead of asking, "Do they think I'm good enough?" you start asking, "Am I keeping my word to myself?" The first question makes you dependent. The second makes you sovereign. This shift changes everything about how you show up in the world. Your voice becomes steadier because it's not seeking approval. Your boundaries become clearer because they're not negotiable. Your presence becomes more magnetic because it's not needy. The approval addiction. Most ambitious people are unknowingly addicted to external validation. They've trained themselves to seek micro hits of approval throughout the day. Likes on social media, positive responses to emails, compliments from colleagues. Each hit provides a temporary boost, but it also reinforces the dependency. The problem with approval addiction isn't just that it's exhausting, it's that it skews your decision-making. When you need other people's validation, you start optimizing for applause instead of impact. You choose projects that look impressive over projects that matter. You say yes to opportunities that boost your ego instead of opportunities that build your assets. Breaking this addiction requires what I call an approval detox, a deliberate period where you stop seeking external validation and start building internal validation instead. This doesn't mean becoming antisocial or indifferent to feedback. It means learning to source your confidence from kept promises rather than received praise. During this detox, you'll notice cravings, the urge to check metrics, the impulse to fish for compliments, the desire to share every small win for validation. Instead of indulging these cravings, observe them. Notice how they feel in your body. Recognize them as withdrawal symptoms from a dependency you're choosing to break. Replace validation-seeking behaviors with value-shipping behaviors. Instead of posting for likes, create something useful. Instead of asking for feedback on your ideas, implement them and let the results speak. Instead of seeking approval for your plans, execute them and let your track record build your reputation. The confidence myth. There's a persistent myth in our culture that confidence comes after achievement. First you succeed, then you feel confident about your abilities. This backwards thinking keeps most people trapped in a cycle of external dependency. The truth is exactly the opposite. Identity comes first, achievement follows. When you know who you are, independent of your circumstances, you make better decisions. When you make better decisions consistently, better outcomes become inevitable. This is why affirmations alone don't work. Telling yourself you're confident without evidence feels hollow because your subconscious knows you're lying. But when you build a track record of kept promises, even tiny ones, your confidence becomes unshakable because it's based on evidence you've created yourself. The most successful entrepreneurs understand this principle intuitively. They don't wait for external validation to feel worthy of success. They create internal validation through consistent action, and that stability becomes the foundation for everything else they build. Consider the story of Oprah Winfrey, who built her media empire not by seeking approval, but by staying true to her values and consistently delivering value to her audience. Her confidence came from knowing she was doing meaningful work, regardless of ratings or reviews. That internal certainty became the magnetic force that attracted everything else. Building your foundation. The process of building enoughness is surprisingly simple, but it requires consistency. Every morning, make 2 small promises to yourself. Write them down. Every evening, check whether you kept them. If you did, acknowledge the win. If you didn't, learn from it and adjust tomorrow's promises accordingly. The key is making promises that are almost impossible to break. If you're not keeping 80% of your daily promises, they're too big. Scale them down until success becomes inevitable, then gradually increase the difficulty as your confidence grows. Create what I call an identity statement, one sentence that captures who you are independent of your circumstances. Something like, I value alignment over applause, or I choose substance over status. Read this statement before making important decisions. Let it guide your choices when external pressure mounts. Share your process, not just your wins. When people ask how you're doing, talk about the systems you're building, the habits you're developing, the promises you're keeping. This reinforces your identity as someone who focuses on inputs rather than outcomes. The compound effect of this approach is staggering. Your decision-making improves because you're not optimizing for approval. Your relationships deepen because people feel your stability. Your opportunities multiply because you're no longer desperate for any particular outcome. The magnetic effect. When you develop genuine enoughness, something magical happens in your professional life. You stop auditioning and start selecting. You stop chasing opportunities and start attracting them. You stop negotiating from desperation and start negotiating from abundance. This shift is felt immediately by everyone around you. Clients sense that you don't need their business, which paradoxically makes them want to work with you more. Partners recognize that you're not dependent on their approval, which makes your partnership more valuable. Competitors realize you're not playing their game of ego and status, which often disarms their attempts to undermine you. Your pricing conversations become easier because you're not attached to any particular outcome. Your boundary setting becomes cleaner because you're not afraid of disappointing people. Your long-term planning becomes more strategic because you're not constantly reacting to external validation or criticism. But perhaps most importantly, you reclaim your time and energy. Instead of spending hours seeking approval, you invest that energy in building assets. Instead of managing other people's opinions of you, you focus on delivering consistent value. Instead of chasing external validation, you create internal validation that no one can take away. The path to enoughness isn't about becoming indifferent or detached from outcomes. It's about becoming so grounded in your own worth that you can care deeply about results without being controlled by them. It's about building a foundation so solid that you can afford to let opportunities walk away if they don't align with your values. This foundation becomes the launching pad for everything else we'll explore in this book. But before you can master the art of holding outcomes lightly while caring deeply about the process, you need to understand a subtle but crucial distinction that most people get backwards. Chapter 4, Detachment. There's a moment in every high-stakes negotiation when everything hangs in the balance. The other party is testing your resolve. The silence stretches uncomfortably. Your heart rate climbs. This is when most people break. They fill the silence with concessions, explanations, or desperate attempts to close the deal. But the most successful negotiators do something counterintuitive. They get more comfortable with the discomfort. They lean into the uncertainty. They demonstrate something that's both rare and magnetic, the ability to care deeply about an outcome while being genuinely okay if it doesn't happen. This isn't indifference. It's not playing hard to get. It's something far more sophisticated and infinitely more powerful. It's what the ancient Stoics called detachment, the art of holding outcomes lightly while engaging fully with the process. Most people misunderstand detachment completely. They think it means becoming cold, distant, or emotionally unavailable. In reality, true detachment allows you to be more present, more caring, and more effective than ever before. When you're not clinging to specific outcomes, you're free to respond to what's actually happening instead of what you desperately want to happen. The clinging trap. Watch someone who desperately wants something, a job, a relationship, a business deal, and you'll notice something peculiar. The more they want it, the more they seem to push it away. Their energy becomes grasping, their language becomes needy, and their behavior becomes increasingly erratic as the stakes rise. This is the clinging trap, and it's one of the most expensive mistakes you can make in business and life. When you're attached to a specific outcome, you lose the ability to see clearly. Your judgment becomes clouded by desire. Your decision-making becomes compromised by fear. Your negotiating position weakens because everyone can sense your desperation. The irony is brutal. The very intensity of your wanting becomes the force that repels what you want. People can feel your attachment from across the room, and it makes them uncomfortable. They sense that you need them more than they need you, which immediately shifts the power dynamic in their favor. Consider how differently you behave when you're genuinely okay with either outcome. Your voice stays steady. Your boundaries remain firm. You ask better questions because you're not afraid of the answers. You make clearer decisions because you're not clouded by desperation. This composure is magnetic because it signals confidence, stability, and abundance. The most successful people I know have mastered this paradox. They care intensely about their work, their relationships, and their goals, but they hold all outcomes lightly. This allows them to engage fully without being controlled by their desires. They can walk away from bad deals because they're not attached to any particular transaction. They can take bigger risks because they're not afraid of failure. The emotional regulation revolution. True detachment isn't about feeling less. It's about feeling fully while choosing your response consciously. This requires what I call emotional regulation, a skill that most people never develop because they confuse suppression with strength. When you suppress emotions, you're essentially storing them in your body like unexploded ordnance. They leak out in weird ways: passive aggression, sudden outbursts, or a general sense of being off that others can feel but can't quite identify. This creates the opposite of the calm presence you're trying to project. Real emotional regulation works differently. You feel the emotion fully, acknowledge it without judgment, and then choose your response from a place of clarity rather than reactivity. This isn't about becoming a robot, it's about becoming more human, not less. The process is surprisingly simple. When you feel a strong emotion rising, pause. Name it in one word: frustrated, excited, disappointed, hopeful. This simple act of labeling activates your prefrontal cortex and begins to calm your amygdala. Then breathe deliberately. 4 counts in, 4 counts hold, 4 counts out, 4 counts hold. This box breathing pattern signals to your nervous system that you're safe and in control. From this regulated state, you can choose your next action based on your values and long-term interests rather than your immediate emotional impulses. You might still feel frustrated, but you won't act from frustration. You might still feel excited, but you won't make promises you can't keep in your enthusiasm. This skill becomes invaluable in high-pressure situations. While others are being hijacked by their emotions, you remain clear and responsive. While they're making decisions from fear or greed, you're making decisions from wisdom and strategy. This composure becomes your competitive advantage. The preference framework. The key to healthy detachment lies in understanding the difference between preferences and attachments. A preference is something you'd like to happen. An attachment is something you believe you need to happen to be okay. When you prefer an outcome, you can work toward it enthusiastically while remaining open to alternatives. When you're attached to an outcome, you become rigid, desperate, and ultimately less effective at achieving it. The energy is completely different, and everyone around you can feel the difference. I call this the preference ladder, a simple framework for maintaining detachment while staying engaged. Before any important interaction, define 3 levels: your ideal outcome, your acceptable outcome, and your minimum viable outcome. Commit to walking away if you can't achieve at least the minimum. This gives you clarity, confidence, and genuine options. The ideal outcome is what you'd love to happen if everything goes perfectly. The acceptable outcome is what you'd be satisfied with, not thrilled, but content. The minimum outcome is the bare minimum you'd accept before walking away. Having these 3 levels defined in advance prevents you from making desperate decisions in the heat of the moment. This framework transforms your entire approach to negotiations, sales conversations, and relationship discussions. Instead of clinging to one specific outcome, you have multiple paths to success. Instead of feeling desperate if things don't go perfectly, you have clear alternatives. Instead of making concessions out of fear, you make decisions from abundance. Steve Jobs exemplified this principle throughout his career. He had strong preferences about product design, company culture, and strategic direction, but he wasn't attached to any particular path to get there. When the original iPhone design wasn't working, he scrapped months of development and started over. When he was fired from Apple, he used it as an opportunity to start Pixar and Next. His detachment from specific outcomes allowed him to pivot quickly and ultimately achieve even greater success. The steady hand advantage. In a world full of reactive, emotional, desperate people, composure becomes a superpower. When you can remain calm under pressure, others naturally look to you for leadership. When you can hold boundaries without drama, people respect your standards. When you can care without clinging, relationships deepen and trust grows. This steady presence creates what I call the anchor effect. In turbulent situations, people gravitate toward the calmest person in the room. They seek out your perspective because they trust your judgment. They want to work with you because they feel safe in your presence. Your detachment becomes magnetic because it signals strength, wisdom, and reliability. The business benefits are immediate and compound over time. Clients trust you with bigger projects because they know you won't panic under pressure. Partners seek you out because they know you'll make decisions based on merit, not emotion. Team members perform better because they feel secure in your steady leadership. Your negotiating position improves dramatically because you're genuinely willing to walk away from bad deals. This isn't a bluff or a tactic. It's a real option that you've prepared for mentally and practically. When the other party senses this genuine detachment, They often improve their offer rather than risk losing you entirely. But perhaps most importantly, your decision quality improves across every area of your life. When you're not clouded by attachment, you see situations more clearly. When you're not driven by desperation, you think more strategically. When you're not afraid of specific outcomes, you take better risks. The care without clinging protocol. The most common mistake people make when learning detachment is swinging too far toward indifference. They become cold, distant, or seemingly uncaring in an attempt to avoid attachment. This creates different problems. People feel disconnected from you, opportunities pass by unnoticed, and relationships suffer from lack of warmth. True detachment requires what I call the care without clinging protocol. You express your interest clearly and warmly, then you step back and allow space for the other person to respond. You state your preferences honestly, then you remain open to alternatives. You invest effort in the process, then you release control over the outcome. This might sound like, I'm genuinely excited about the possibility of working together, and I'm completely okay if it doesn't turn out to be the right fit. Or, this project matters to me, and I trust that whatever happens will be for the best. The key is that both parts of the statement are true. You do care, and you are okay either way. This approach requires practice because it goes against most people's instincts. We're trained to believe that caring more leads to better outcomes, that wanting something intensely increases our chances of getting it. In reality, the opposite is often true. Intense wanting creates pressure, and pressure creates resistance. The most effective approach is to care deeply about the process while holding outcomes lightly. Pour your energy into doing excellent work, building genuine relationships, and creating real value. Then trust that the right outcomes will emerge naturally from this foundation of integrity and excellence. The ripple effect. When you master detachment, the benefits ripple out into every area of your life. Your relationships become more authentic because you're not trying to control how others feel about you. Your work becomes more creative because you're not afraid of failure. Your decisions become wiser because you're not clouded by desperate wanting. People begin to seek you out not just for your skills, but for your presence. They want to be around someone who can remain calm in chaos, who can care without clinging, who can engage fully without being controlled by outcomes. This magnetic quality becomes one of your greatest professional and personal assets. Your stress levels drop dramatically because you're no longer fighting reality. Instead of resisting what's happening, you learn to work with it. Instead of demanding that life conform to your expectations, you become curious about what's actually emerging. This shift from resistance to acceptance frees up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy. But detachment is just one piece of the puzzle. Once you've learned to hold outcomes lightly while caring deeply about the process, you're ready to discover something even more powerful, a way of working that feels effortless yet produces extraordinary results. The secret lies in understanding that the right rhythm can accomplish more than the right effort. Chapter 5. Effortless Action. Watch a master craftsman at work, a skilled carpenter, an experienced surgeon, a seasoned chef, and you'll notice something remarkable. Their movements appear almost lazy. There's no wasted motion, no visible strain, no dramatic flourishes. Yet they accomplish more in an hour than most people manage in a day. This isn't laziness. It's something far more sophisticated, the art of effortless action. It's what happens when you stop fighting against the natural rhythm of work and start flowing with it. When you stop measuring effort and start measuring output. When you discover that the right cadence can accomplish more than the right intensity. Most ambitious people are trapped in what I call the effort fallacy, the belief that harder work automatically produces better results. They equate struggle with progress, exhaustion with achievement, and busyness with value creation. This mindset doesn't just burn them out, it actually reduces their effectiveness. The truth is counterintuitive. Sustainable excellence comes from intelligent rhythm, not relentless force. The most successful people I know have learned to work like water, finding the path of least resistance while maintaining unstoppable momentum. The friction multiplier. There's a hidden tax on everything you do when you're operating in force mode. Rushed decisions create rework. Frantic energy makes mistakes. Constant urgency drains the creative judgment that produces your best work. What feels like productivity is often just expensive motion. Consider what happens when you're always in crisis mode. Your thinking becomes reactive instead of strategic. Your communication becomes scattered instead of clear. Your work becomes urgent instead of important. You're moving fast, but you're not moving forward. The market senses this friction immediately. Clients can feel your stress through your emails. Partners notice the subtle desperation in your voice. Colleagues start avoiding you because your energy is draining rather than energizing. The very effort you're putting in to succeed becomes the force that repels success. This creates what I call the friction multiplier, a compound effect where force creates resistance, resistance creates more effort, and more effort creates more resistance. You're working harder but accomplishing less. You're moving faster but making slower progress. You're trying harder but getting worse results. The most successful entrepreneurs understand this principle intuitively. They've learned that sustainable growth comes from reducing friction, not increasing force. They optimize for flow, not effort. They measure outputs, not inputs. They build systems that work even when they're not working. Warren Buffett exemplifies this approach. He doesn't chase deals or force opportunities. Instead, he's built a reputation and a system that brings the right opportunities to him. He reads, thinks, and waits. When the perfect opportunity appears, he acts decisively. His effortless success is actually the result of decades of intelligent positioning and patient execution. The rhythm revolution. The secret to effortless action lies in understanding that work has a natural rhythm, just like music or breathing. When you align with this rhythm, everything becomes easier. When you fight against it, everything becomes harder. Most people try to force productivity by working longer hours or pushing through resistance. This is like trying to make music by hitting the piano keys harder. More force doesn't create better music, it creates noise. Better music comes from understanding timing, spacing, and flow. The same principle applies to work. Better results come from understanding your natural energy cycles, designing your day around deep work, and creating space for insights to emerge. This isn't about working less, it's about working in harmony with how your brain actually functions. Your brain operates in cycles throughout the day. There are periods when you're naturally focused and creative, and periods when you're better suited for routine tasks or social interaction. Most people ignore these cycles and try to force peak performance all day long. This is exhausting and ineffective. The alternative is to design what I call a 3-block day: create, connect, and clean up. Each block aligns with different types of energy and different types of work. The create block happens when your mind is sharpest, usually in the morning. The connect block happens when you're socially energized, usually midday. The cleanup block happens when you're winding down, usually in the afternoon or evening. This simple structure transforms your entire relationship with work. Instead of fighting your natural rhythms, you're working with them. Instead of forcing productivity, you're creating conditions for it to emerge naturally. Instead of exhausting yourself with constant effort, you're sustaining yourself with intelligent design. The minimum viable ship philosophy. One of the biggest obstacles to effortless action is perfectionism disguised as quality. People spend weeks polishing something that could have been shipped in days. They optimize details that no one will notice while delaying value that everyone needs. This is where the minimum viable ship philosophy becomes transformative. Instead of trying to create something perfect, you focus on creating something useful. Instead of waiting until it's complete, you ship when it's valuable. Instead of building everything at once, you build iteratively. The key insight is that done beats perfect in almost every scenario. A useful tool shipped today is more valuable than a perfect tool shipped next month. A helpful insight shared now is more impactful than a comprehensive analysis delivered later. A working prototype tested immediately teaches you more than a polished product launched eventually. This doesn't mean lowering your standards. It means being strategic about where you apply them. You maintain high standards for the core value proposition while relaxing standards for peripheral details. You ship version 1 quickly, then improve based on real feedback rather than imagined requirements. The compound effect of this approach is remarkable. While others are perfecting their first project, you've shipped 5. While they're planning their launch, you're iterating based on market feedback. While they're afraid of criticism, you're learning from it. Your willingness to ship imperfect work becomes your competitive advantage. The spacious calendar strategy. Most successful people have learned a counterintuitive truth. An empty calendar is more valuable than a full one. Space creates opportunity. Margin enables serendipity. Slack allows for the unexpected insights and connections that drive breakthrough results. When your calendar is packed, you're essentially saying no to everything that isn't already planned. You can't take advantage of sudden opportunities. You can't dive deep when inspiration strikes. You can't help someone who needs your expertise. You're optimized for efficiency, but closed to effectiveness. The alternative is to deliberately create what I call slack slots, periods of unscheduled time that you protect as fiercely as your most important meetings. This isn't laziness or poor planning. It's strategic positioning for the opportunities and insights that can't be scheduled. During these slack periods, magic happens. You have time to think strategically instead of just tactically. You can explore interesting tangents that lead to breakthrough insights. You can have the spontaneous conversations that turn into valuable partnerships. You can pursue the side projects that become your next big opportunity. This approach requires faith because the value isn't immediately obvious. When you're in a slack period, it can feel like you're wasting time. But over months and years, you'll discover that these unscheduled periods often produce your most valuable outcomes. The key insight you had during a walk, the relationship you built during an impromptu coffee, the opportunity you could pursue because you had the bandwidth. The process attachment principle. The final element of effortless action is learning to attach your identity to inputs rather than outcomes. When your sense of progress depends on external results, you become reactive and anxious. When your sense of progress depends on consistent inputs, you become steady and confident. This is what I call process attachment, tying your daily satisfaction to the things you can control rather than the things you can't. You can control whether you ship something today. You can't control whether it gets the response you want. You can control whether you make 5 meaningful connections this week. You can't control whether they lead to immediate opportunities. The shift is subtle but transformative. Instead of measuring your worth by outcomes that fluctuate wildly, you measure it by processes that you execute consistently. Instead of feeling successful only when external metrics spike, you feel successful every day that you honor your commitments to yourself. This creates what I call the compound confidence effect. Each day that you execute your process, you build evidence that you're reliable, capable, and committed. This evidence accumulates into unshakable confidence that doesn't depend on external validation. You know you're making progress because you can see the inputs adding up, even when the outputs aren't immediately visible. The most successful people I know have mastered this principle. They celebrate shipping, not just selling. They measure consistency, not just results. They track inputs, not just outcomes. This gives them the emotional stability to persist through inevitable setbacks and the confidence to take bigger risks. The effortless advantage. When you master effortless action, several things happen simultaneously. Your stress levels drop because you're no longer fighting against natural rhythms. Your quality improves because you're working from clarity rather than urgency. Your output increases because you're eliminating friction and waste. But perhaps most importantly, your reputation begins to shift. People start noticing that you deliver consistently without drama. They observe that you meet deadlines without panic. They see that you produce excellent work without apparent strain. This calm competence becomes magnetic. Clients begin seeking you out because they trust that working with you will be smooth and professional. Partners want to collaborate because they know you won't create unnecessary stress. Team members want to work for you because they feel safe and supported in your presence. Your effortless approach becomes a competitive moat that's difficult for others to replicate. While competitors are burning out their teams and stressing their clients, you're building sustainable systems and calm relationships. While they're optimizing for short-term intensity, you're optimizing for long-term effectiveness. The compound effect of this approach extends far beyond work. Your relationships improve because you're present and calm. Your health improves because you're not constantly stressed. Your creativity flourishes because you have space for insights to emerge. Your entire life begins to feel more spacious and sustainable. But effortless action is just the beginning. Once you've learned to work with natural rhythms instead of against them, you're ready to discover something even more powerful: how to position yourself so that the best opportunities come to you instead of requiring you to chase them. Chapter 6: Chooser's Frame. There's a moment in every business relationship when the power dynamic crystallizes. It might happen during the first phone call, in the initial email exchange, or during that crucial face-to-face meeting. One person positions themselves as the selector, and the other automatically becomes the supplicant. One person sets the standards, and the other scrambles to meet them. Most people find themselves on the wrong side of this dynamic without even realizing it. They're pitching when they should be qualifying. They're explaining when they should be exploring. They're auditioning when they should be selecting. The result? Worse terms, weaker relationships, and a constant feeling of chasing rather than choosing. But what if you could flip this script? What if, instead of hoping someone picks you, you could position yourself as the one doing the picking? What if your very presence communicated that you have options, standards, and the confidence to walk away from anything that doesn't align? This isn't about arrogance or manipulation. It's about understanding a fundamental truth. People mirror the frame you bring to every interaction. If you show up as someone who needs their approval, they'll treat you like someone seeking permission. If you show up as someone evaluating fit, they'll treat you like someone worth impressing. The audition trap. Watch most people in business development conversations, and you'll notice something peculiar. They're performing. They're trying to prove their worth, demonstrate their capabilities, and convince the other party to choose them. Every question becomes an opportunity to showcase expertise. Every pause becomes a chance to add more value. This audition mentality seems logical on the surface. After all, don't you need to show people why they should work with you? Don't you need to demonstrate your value and prove your competence? The answer is nuanced. Yes, you need to communicate value, but no, you shouldn't do it from a position of desperation. When you're auditioning, you're implicitly accepting a power dynamic where the other person holds all the cards. They become the judge, and you become the performer. They set the criteria, and you scramble to meet them. They control the timeline, and you accommodate their schedule. This dynamic infects every aspect of the relationship that follows. The most successful people I know have learned to flip this completely. Instead of auditioning for opportunities, they qualify them. Instead of trying to convince people to work with them, they evaluate whether people are worth working with. Instead of accepting whatever terms are offered, they propose terms that work for everyone involved. This shift requires genuine confidence, not performative bravado. You can't fake the chooser's frame because people can sense authenticity from across the room. The confidence has to be real, which means you need real options, real standards, and real willingness to walk away from opportunities that don't align. The standards revolution. The foundation of the chooser's frame lies in having clear, non-negotiable standards. Not preferences or wishes, but actual lines in the sand that you won't cross, regardless of how attractive an opportunity appears on the surface. Most people avoid setting standards because they're afraid of limiting their options. They worry that being selective will reduce their opportunities. In reality, the opposite is true. Clear standards actually increase your options because they help you avoid the wrong opportunities that would consume time and energy without delivering value. Think about the most respected professionals in any field. They all have clear standards about the work they'll accept, the clients they'll serve, and the terms they'll agree to. These standards aren't arbitrary. They're based on experience, values, and a clear understanding of what leads to mutual success. Your standards should cover the essential elements of any business relationship: scope boundaries, pricing parameters, communication preferences, timeline expectations, and behavioral norms. These aren't demands or ultimatums. They're simply the conditions under which you do your best work and deliver the most value. The key is to develop these standards before you need them. When you're in the middle of a negotiation, it's too late to figure out your walkaway points. When someone is pressuring you for a quick decision, it's too late to clarify your values. The standards need to be established, written down, and internalized before you enter any high-stakes conversation. Warren Buffett exemplifies this principle through his investment criteria at Berkshire Hathaway. He has clear standards about the types of companies he'll consider, the management teams he'll back, and the prices he'll pay. These standards are public, consistent, and non-negotiable. This clarity attracts the right opportunities while filtering out the wrong ones. The option engine. Having standards is meaningless without options. If you only have one opportunity on the table, you can't afford to be selective. If you're desperate for any deal, you can't maintain your boundaries. If you're operating from scarcity, you can't project abundance. This is why building what I call an option engine becomes crucial. It's a systematic approach to creating multiple opportunities simultaneously, so you're never dependent on any single outcome. When you have genuine alternatives, you can afford to be choosy. When you can afford to be choosy, you attract better opportunities. The option engine isn't about collecting opportunities for the sake of having them. It's about creating enough legitimate alternatives that you can evaluate each one based on merit rather than desperation. This requires consistent effort over time, building relationships, creating value, and maintaining visibility in your market. The most effective approach is to always have at least 2 significant opportunities in your pipeline, not just prospects or possibilities, but real options with real potential. This gives you the psychological freedom to evaluate each opportunity objectively rather than emotionally. Building options requires a different mindset than chasing deals. Instead of focusing all your energy on closing one opportunity, you invest energy in creating multiple opportunities. Instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, you cultivate several baskets simultaneously. Instead of hoping one thing works out, you create conditions where several things could work out. This approach feels counterintuitive because it requires investing time and energy in opportunities that might not materialize. But the investment pays dividends in the form of genuine confidence, better negotiating position, and higher quality outcomes across all your opportunities. The qualification process. Once you have standards and options, you need a systematic way to evaluate opportunities against your criteria. This is where most people get it backwards. They start by trying to convince the other party to choose them instead of first determining whether the opportunity is worth pursuing. The qualification process should feel like a mutual interview. You're evaluating whether they meet your standards, while they're evaluating whether you meet theirs. You're exploring fit from both directions, rather than assuming fit and trying to force it. This starts with asking better questions. Instead of, "How can I help you?" try, "What does success look like for this project?" Instead of, "When do you need this completed?" try, "What's driving the timeline for this initiative?" Instead of, "What's your budget?" try, "How are you thinking about investment in this area?" The subtle difference in framing changes everything. The first set of questions positions you as a service provider trying to accommodate their needs. The second set positions you as a strategic partner trying to understand their situation. The energy is completely different, and the responses you get will be completely different. During this qualification process, you should be as interested in finding reasons to say no as reasons to say yes. A good fit should be obvious to both parties. If you're having to convince someone that you're the right choice, or if they're having to convince you that it's the right opportunity, it's probably not a good fit. The best opportunities feel easy from the beginning. The conversation flows naturally. The mutual value is clear. The timeline makes sense for everyone involved. The budget aligns with the scope. When you find these opportunities, you can move forward with confidence. When you don't find them, you can decline gracefully and invest your energy elsewhere. The graceful decline. One of the most important skills in maintaining the chooser's frame is learning to say no gracefully. Most people either avoid saying no altogether, or they say it in ways that burn bridges and damage relationships. Neither approach serves your long-term interests. The key to a graceful decline is to make it about fit rather than judgment. You're not rejecting them as people or dismissing their project as unworthy. You're simply acknowledging that there isn't alignment between what they need and what you provide, or between their timeline and your availability, or between their budget and your pricing. A graceful decline should leave the other party feeling respected and understood, even if they're disappointed by the outcome. It should preserve the relationship for potential future opportunities. It should demonstrate your professionalism and integrity. And it should reinforce your positioning as someone who is selective about the work they accept. The best declines often include a resource or referral that might help them move forward. This demonstrates that you care about their success, even though you can't be part of it. It shows that your standards aren't about being difficult. They're about ensuring mutual success. This approach to declining opportunities actually enhances your reputation over time. People remember professionals who are honest about fit, who don't waste their time with misaligned proposals, and who help them find better solutions even when it doesn't benefit them directly. The compound effect. When you consistently operate from the chooser's frame, several things happen simultaneously. Your confidence grows because you're making decisions from abundance rather than scarcity. Your relationships improve because you're attracting people who respect your standards. Your results improve because you're working on better fit opportunities. But perhaps most importantly, your reputation begins to shift. People start seeing you as someone who is selective, professional, and confident. They begin approaching you differently, with more respect, better opportunities, and clearer expectations. The market starts treating you like someone who has options because you demonstrably do have options. This creates a virtuous cycle. Better opportunities lead to better results. Better results lead to stronger reputation. Stronger reputation leads to even better opportunities. Your selectivity becomes a competitive advantage that compounds over time. The chooser's frame isn't just a business strategy. It's a way of approaching all your relationships and opportunities. When you stop auditioning and start selecting, when you stop chasing and start choosing, when you stop hoping and start evaluating, everything changes. But maintaining this frame requires more than just confidence and standards. It requires something that most people struggle to protect in our hyper-connected world: the ability to control where your attention goes and how you allocate your most precious resource. Chapter 7. Sovereign Attention. There's a peculiar phenomenon happening in boardrooms around the world. The most successful executives, the ones commanding seven-figure salaries and making decisions that affect thousands of people, have something in common that has nothing to do with their intelligence, education, or technical skills. They're present. Not just physically present, but mentally present. When they're in a conversation, they're fully in that conversation. When they're thinking through a problem, they're completely absorbed in that problem. When they're listening to someone, that person feels like the only person in the world. This quality, what I call sovereign attention, has become the rarest and most valuable asset in our hyper-connected economy. while everyone else is scattered across a dozen apps, notifications, and half-finished thoughts. These individuals have learned to direct their focus like a laser beam. The result? They see opportunities others miss, make connections others can't, and command respect that money can't buy. But here's what's fascinating. This isn't a natural talent. It's a learned skill. And in a world where most people have surrendered their attention to algorithms and notifications, reclaiming sovereignty over your focus becomes an almost unfair competitive advantage. The attention economy war. Your attention is under siege. Every app on your phone is designed by teams of neuroscientists and behavioral economists whose job is to capture and monetize your focus. Every notification is engineered to trigger a dopamine response. Every platform is optimized to keep you scrolling, clicking, and engaging just a little bit longer. This isn't an accident or a side effect. It's the entire business model. Your attention is the product being sold to advertisers. Your focus is the commodity being harvested and redistributed. Your mental bandwidth is the resource being extracted and converted into profit for others. The cost of this extraction is staggering, but it's largely invisible. You don't notice the cognitive switching penalty when you check your phone mid-conversation. You don't feel the decision fatigue accumulating as you process hundreds of micro-inputs throughout the day. You don't see how your ability to think deeply, create meaningfully, and connect authentically is being eroded by constant fragmentation. But the most successful people I know have recognized this war for what it is and have chosen to fight back. They've realized that in an economy where everyone is distracted, focused attention becomes a superpower. Where everyone is reactive, proactive thinking becomes invaluable. Where everyone is scattered, concentrated effort becomes magnetic. The battle for your attention isn't just about productivity, it's about identity. Where your attention goes consistently, your identity follows. If you're constantly consuming other people's content, you become a consumer rather than a creator. If you're always responding to other people's priorities, you become reactive rather than strategic. If you're perpetually distracted, you become forgettable rather than memorable. The presence premium. There's a reason why the most successful people command premium prices for their time and attention. It's not just because they're skilled, it's because they're present. When you're fully engaged with someone, they feel it immediately. When you're scattered and distracted, they feel that too. This presence creates what I call the presence premium, a multiplier effect where your impact increases exponentially when your attention is focused rather than fragmented. A 5-minute conversation with someone who is fully present is more valuable than an hour with someone who is mentally elsewhere. Think about the last time you had someone's complete attention. How did it feel? Probably rare, valuable, and memorable. Now think about the last time you tried to have a conversation with someone who was constantly checking their phone or clearly thinking about something else. How did that feel? Probably frustrating, disappointing, and forgettable. The market is starting to price this difference. Clients are willing to pay more for advisors who are fully present during meetings. Teams perform better under leaders who give them undivided attention. Relationships deepen with people who can focus completely on the conversation at hand. This creates an interesting paradox. In a world where everyone is trying to be more available and responsive, the people who are selectively available and thoughtfully responsive become more valuable. Scarcity of attention increases its perceived worth. Quality of focus trumps quantity of availability. The most successful entrepreneurs understand this intuitively. They don't try to be accessible to everyone all the time. Instead, they create specific windows for different types of attention: deep work, strategic thinking, relationship building, administrative tasks. This allows them to be fully present for each activity rather than partially present for everything. The focus budget revolution. Most people treat attention like it's unlimited. They scatter it across dozens of inputs, outputs, and activities without considering the cumulative cost. This is like trying to manage finances without a budget. You end up overspending in low-value areas and underinvesting in high-value opportunities. The alternative is to treat attention like the finite resource it actually is. You have roughly 100 units of focused attention per day, some days more, some days less, depending on your energy, health, and circumstances. The question isn't whether you'll spend these units, but how you'll allocate them. This requires what I call a focus budget, a deliberate allocation of your attention units based on your priorities and goals. Just like a financial budget, this forces you to make conscious trade-offs. If you spend 30 units on social media, you have 30 fewer units for deep work. If you spend 20 units on low-priority emails, you have 20 fewer units for strategic thinking. The most effective allocation I've discovered follows a simple pattern: roughly 50% for creation and deep work, 30% for relationships and communication, and 20% for administration and maintenance. This isn't a rigid formula. It should be adjusted based on your role, season, and priorities, but it provides a useful starting point. The key insight is that high-value activities require high-quality attention. You can't do your best creative work with fragmented focus. You can't have meaningful conversations while distracted. You can't make strategic decisions with a scattered mind. By protecting your best attention for your most important work, you multiply your impact. The signal window strategy. One of the most powerful ways to reclaim attention sovereignty is to create what I call signal windows, specific times when you're available for communication and interaction, with clear boundaries around when you're not. Most people operate with what I call always-on availability. They respond to messages as they arrive, take calls whenever they ring, and remain perpetually accessible to anyone who wants their attention. This feels responsive and professional, but it's actually counterproductive. Constant availability signals low value and creates a reactive rather than proactive relationship with your time. The alternative is to batch your communication into specific windows, perhaps 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon. During these windows, you're fully present and responsive. Outside these windows, you're focused on deep work, strategic thinking, or relationship building. This approach feels risky at first because you worry about missing urgent opportunities or appearing unresponsive. In practice, the opposite happens. People adapt to your rhythm and respect your boundaries. The quality of your responses improves because you're giving them focused attention. Your reputation shifts from always available to worth waiting for. The key is to communicate these windows clearly and honor them consistently. If you say you'll respond to messages between 9 to 9:30 a.m. and 4 to 4:30 p.m., then respond during those times every day. If you say you're unavailable for calls on Tuesday mornings, then protect that time fiercely. Consistency builds trust and allows others to plan around your rhythm. Bill Gates famously implemented this approach during his time at Microsoft, designating specific think weeks where he would disappear completely to read, reflect, and plan. These periods of intense focus often led to breakthrough insights and strategic pivots that shaped the company's direction. His willingness to be temporarily unavailable made his eventual availability more valuable. The deep work sanctuary. The highest leverage use of your attention is what Cal Newport calls deep work, cognitively demanding activities that create value, improve skills, and are difficult to replicate. This is where breakthrough insights happen, where complex problems get solved, and where your most valuable contributions emerge. But deep work requires more than just time. It requires the right kind of attention. Fragmented, distracted, or anxious attention can't produce deep work any more than a flickering candle can illuminate a room. You need sustained, focused, calm attention that can dive below the surface of problems and stay there long enough to find solutions. Creating a deep work sanctuary means designing an environment and routine that protects this type of attention. This might mean a specific physical space where you do your most important thinking. It might mean a particular time of day when your mind is sharpest. It might mean a ritual that signals to your brain that it's time to focus deeply. The most successful people I know treat their deep work time like sacred space. They turn off notifications, close unnecessary applications, and create physical and digital barriers to distraction. They might work with noise-canceling headphones in a separate room or during hours when they're least likely to be interrupted. But perhaps most importantly, they protect this time from their own impulses. They resist the urge to check email just quickly or to multitask on administrative items. They understand that deep work requires not just external protection from distraction, but internal discipline to stay focused on the task at hand. The compound effect of clarity. When you consistently protect and direct your attention, something remarkable happens. Your thinking becomes clearer because you're not constantly context switching. Your relationships deepen because people feel your presence. Your work improves because you're bringing focused energy to important problems. But the benefits compound over time in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Your reputation shifts from scattered to focused. People begin seeking you out for important conversations because they know you'll be present. Opportunities flow toward you because you're known for thoughtful engagement rather than reactive responses. Your decision-making improves dramatically because you have the mental bandwidth to consider second and third-order effects. Your creativity flourishes because you're giving your mind the space it needs to make unexpected connections. Your stress decreases because you're no longer trying to hold dozens of competing priorities in your head simultaneously. Perhaps most importantly, you begin to feel like yourself again. Instead of being pulled in a dozen directions by external demands, you're choosing where to direct your energy based on your values and priorities. Instead of reacting to whatever is loudest or most urgent, you're responding to what's most important and meaningful. This sovereignty over your attention becomes the foundation for everything else we've discussed: the calm confidence, the chooser's frame, the effortless action. When you control where your focus goes, you control where your life goes. When you direct your attention deliberately, you direct your destiny consciously. But attention sovereignty is just the beginning. Once you've reclaimed control over your focus, you're ready to discover something even more powerful: how to transform your deepest desires from sources of suffering into engines of creation. Chapter 8, Desire Alchemy. There's something almost magical about watching a master craftsman work. Whether it's a blacksmith shaping red-hot metal or a programmer building elegant code, they share a peculiar quality. They seem to channel their deepest wants into their work. Their desire doesn't make them desperate, it makes them prolific. Their longing doesn't create neediness, it creates value. This is the secret that separates the makers from the takers, the creators from the consumers, the magnetic from the needy. Instead of trying to extract what they want from the world, they transmute their wanting into something the world actually needs. Instead of chasing opportunities, they create assets that make opportunities chase them. Most people get this backwards. They feel desire and immediately try to satisfy it by taking something from someone else: attention, approval, money, opportunities. This creates a scarcity loop where wanting leads to asking, asking leads to resistance, and resistance leads to more wanting. The cycle never ends because the fundamental approach is flawed. But what if desire could be transformed into something else entirely? What if your deepest wants could become the raw material for your greatest contributions? What if the very thing that makes you feel needy could become the force that makes you valuable? This is the art of desire alchemy, the process of transmuting wanting into making, craving into creating, and longing into building. It's how the most successful people turn their internal drives into external assets that serve others while serving themselves. The maker's advantage. There's a fundamental asymmetry in how the world treats makers versus takers. Makers get chased, takers do the chasing. Makers receive inbound interest, takers generate outbound effort. Makers build leverage, takers burn energy. The difference isn't talent or luck, it's approach. When you're constantly asking for things, attention, opportunities, partnerships, sales, You're positioning yourself as someone who needs something from others. This immediately creates resistance because people instinctively protect their resources from those who might deplete them. Your very approach signals scarcity and triggers defensive responses. But when you're consistently creating things, insights, tools, frameworks, solutions, you're positioning yourself as someone who adds value to others. This creates attraction because people naturally gravitate towards sources of value. Your approach signals abundance and triggers approach responses. The most successful entrepreneurs understand this principle intuitively. Instead of pitching their way into rooms, they build their way into conversations. Instead of convincing people to pay attention, they create things worth paying attention to. Instead of asking for opportunities, they generate assets that create opportunities. Consider how Reid Hoffman built LinkedIn. Instead of trying to convince people to join another social network, he created a platform that solved real problems for professionals. Instead of chasing investors, he built something that made investors chase him. Instead of asking for partnerships, he created value that made partnerships inevitable. This maker's advantage compounds over time. Each asset you create becomes a magnet for new opportunities. Each piece of value you ship builds reputation and trust. Each problem you solve publicly demonstrates your capabilities to potential clients, partners, and collaborators. Your body of work becomes your business development engine. The transmutation process. The key to desire alchemy lies in understanding that wanting is energy, and energy can be redirected. Instead of letting desire drive you toward extraction, you can channel it toward creation. Instead of using it to take from others, you can use it to build for others. This requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to your wants. Instead of seeing desire as something to be satisfied immediately, you start seeing it as fuel for creation. Instead of trying to eliminate wanting, you learn to harness it. Instead of being driven by desire, you learn to drive with it. The process is surprisingly simple. When you feel a strong want for recognition, for success, for connection, for impact, instead of immediately trying to get it from someone else, you ask a different question. What could I create that would naturally attract what I want? Want recognition? Create work worth recognizing. Want success? Build systems that generate success. Want connection? Develop insights that foster connection. Want impact? Ship solutions that create impact. The desire remains the same, but the approach transforms completely. This transmutation process calms the urgency that comes with wanting because you're taking productive action toward your goals. Instead of feeling helpless and dependent on others, you feel empowered and in control of your outcomes. Instead of waiting for someone to give you what you want, you're actively building what you need. The most successful people I know have mastered this transmutation. When they want to break into a new industry, they create content that demonstrates their understanding of that industry. When they want to attract better clients, they build case studies that showcase their capabilities. When they want to expand their network, they host events that bring valuable people together. The daily creation habit. The foundation of Desire Alchemy is what I call the micro-ship rule. Create and publish one small, useful thing every day. Not something perfect or comprehensive, but something helpful that someone else can use immediately. This daily practice transforms your relationship with both desire and creation. The key word is micro. Most people fail at consistent creation because they try to build something significant every time. They want to write the definitive guide, create the perfect tool, or develop the ultimate framework. This perfectionist approach leads to paralysis because the bar is too high and the timeline is too long. Instead, focus on creating something small enough to finish in 15 to 45 minutes, but valuable enough that someone would thank you for it. A useful checklist, a brief insight, a simple template, a quick case study, a helpful tip. These micro-creations seem insignificant individually, but they compound into something remarkable over time. The daily rhythm is crucial because it builds momentum and identity. When you ship something useful every day, you start seeing yourself as a creator rather than a consumer. When you consistently add value to the world, you start feeling valuable yourself. When you regularly solve problems for others, you start attracting people with problems to solve. This practice also solves the common problem of not knowing what to create. When you're committed to shipping daily, you become hyper-aware of the problems, questions, and challenges around you. Every conversation becomes a source of content ideas. Every struggle becomes an opportunity to help others facing similar challenges. Seth Godin exemplifies this approach through his daily blog, which he's maintained for over 2 decades. Each post is brief, focused, and useful. Individually, they're small contributions. Collectively, they've built one of the most respected voices in marketing and business. His daily practice of creation has become his primary business development tool. The give and forget philosophy. One of the biggest obstacles to effective creation is the tendency to keep score. People create something valuable, share it, and then anxiously monitor the response. They track likes, comments, shares, and downloads. They measure their worth by the immediate feedback they receive. This scorekeeper mentality undermines the entire process. The alternative is what I call the give and forget philosophy. You create something useful, share it generously, and then move on to creating the next thing. You don't chase responses or beg for engagement. You don't keep a ledger of who owes you what. You simply ship value consistently and trust that the right people will notice and respond when they're ready. This approach feels risky because you're not actively managing the outcome. You're not following up to make sure people saw your work. You're not asking for feedback or pushing for engagement. You're simply creating, sharing, and moving forward. It requires faith that value will be recognized and rewarded over time. But this faith is well placed because the give and forget approach actually accelerates results. When people feel no pressure to respond, they're more likely to engage authentically. When they sense no agenda behind your generosity, they're more likely to trust your motives. When they see consistent value without constant asking, they're more likely to seek you out when they need help. The compound effect of this approach is remarkable. While others are chasing individual responses, you're building a reputation for consistent value. While they're managing relationships transactionally, you're developing trust organically. While they're asking for opportunities, you're creating conditions that make opportunities inevitable. The asset stack strategy. Not all creation is equal. Some things you make will have immediate impact but limited longevity. Others will have modest initial response but compound value over time. The most effective creators learn to build what I call an asset stack, a portfolio of different types of value that work together to create sustained attraction. The asset stack consists of 3 types of creation: evergreen content that remains valuable over time, case studies that demonstrate real results, and tools that solve specific problems. Each type serves a different purpose and attracts different types of attention, but together they create a comprehensive value proposition. Evergreen content includes principles, frameworks, and insights that don't become outdated quickly. These pieces continue attracting attention and providing value long after they're created. They become the foundation of your reputation and the entry point for new audiences discovering your work. Case studies showcase your ability to generate real results in real situations. They provide social proof and demonstrate practical application of your ideas. They help potential clients envision working with you and understand the value you can provide. Tools solve immediate problems and provide instant value. They might be templates, calculators, checklists, or scripts that people can use right away. Tools often generate the most immediate engagement because they provide tangible utility. The key is to create a mix of all 3 types, rather than focusing exclusively on one. This diversified approach ensures that you're attracting different types of people at different stages of their journey. Some will discover you through your evergreen insights, others through your case studies, and still others through your practical tools. The invitation paradox. Here's where Desire Alchemy becomes truly powerful. The less you ask for what you want, the more likely you are to receive it. This is the invitation paradox. When you stop pushing for outcomes, outcomes start pulling toward you. When you stop broadcasting your needs, people start offering to meet them. This happens because consistent value creation changes how people perceive you. Instead of seeing you as someone who wants something from them, they start seeing you as someone who gives something to them. Instead of feeling like they need to protect their resources from you, they start feeling like they want to support your work. The shift is subtle but profound. People begin reaching out to thank you for your insights. They start sharing your work with their networks. They begin asking if they can help with your projects. They offer opportunities, introductions, and collaborations without being asked. This organic attraction is far more powerful than any sales or marketing effort because it's based on genuine value rather than persuasive technique. People are approaching you because they want to, not because you've convinced them to. They're offering opportunities because they see mutual benefit, not because you've pressured them into it. The most successful creators understand this paradox and lean into it. They focus entirely on creating value and let opportunities emerge naturally from that foundation. They trust that consistent contribution will generate consistent returns, even if the timing and form of those returns can't be predicted or controlled. The compound creation effect. When you consistently practice desire alchemy, transmuting wants into assets, shipping value daily, giving without keeping score, something remarkable happens. Your reputation begins to precede you. Your work starts marketing itself. Your assets begin generating opportunities while you sleep. People start citing your frameworks in their own work. They begin referencing your insights in their conversations. They share your tools with their colleagues and friends. Your ideas spread organically because they're genuinely useful, not because you're pushing them. This organic spread creates what I call the compound creation effect. Each piece of value you create increases the likelihood that your next piece will be discovered and shared. Each person you help becomes a potential advocate for your work. Each problem you solve publicly demonstrates your capability to solve similar problems privately. The timeline for this compound effect varies, but the pattern is consistent. In the beginning, you're creating more than you're receiving. You're giving more than you're getting. You're shipping more than you're selling. This feels unbalanced and unsustainable, but it's actually the investment phase of a longer cycle. Over time, the balance shifts. Your past creations start generating present opportunities. Your accumulated assets begin attracting aligned people. Your body of work becomes a magnet for the exact outcomes you originally desired but stopped chasing. This is the ultimate irony of desire alchemy. By stopping the pursuit of what you want and starting the creation of what others need, you end up receiving more of what you originally wanted than you ever could have achieved through direct pursuit. But creation is just one piece of the puzzle. Once you've learned to transmute desire into assets, you're ready to discover how all these principles integrate into a complete system, one that transforms not just how you work, but how you exist in the world. Chapter 9, Compound Calm. You've traveled a long way from where you started. Remember that person who opened this book, the one chasing outcomes, scattered across a dozen priorities, measuring worth by external metrics? That person was operating from a fundamentally different paradigm. They believed that wanting more would get them more, that pushing harder would yield better results, that being always available would create more opportunities. Now you understand the deeper truth. Everything you want is on the other side of wanting it less. Every outcome you've been chasing becomes more likely when you stop chasing it. Every relationship you've been trying to force becomes more natural when you stop forcing it. Every opportunity you've been grasping for becomes more accessible when you stop grasping. This isn't mystical thinking, it's practical psychology. When you stop signaling scarcity, you start signaling sufficiency. When you stop broadcasting need, you start broadcasting value. When you stop pushing, you start pulling. The world responds to your signals, and you've learned to send entirely different signals. But understanding the principles is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when these ideas integrate into a complete operating system, a way of being that becomes as natural as breathing. This is what I call compound calm, the state where your inner stability creates outer attraction, where your centered presence becomes magnetic, where your quiet confidence draws everything you need toward you. The signal revolution. Everything we've explored in this book comes down to one fundamental insight: signals precede outcomes. Before anyone decides to work with you, they sense your energy. Before anyone offers you an opportunity, they feel your presence. Before anyone trusts you with something important, they experience your stability. Most people focus on outcomes while ignoring the signals they're sending. They want the promotion but broadcast insecurity. They want the client but emit desperation. They want the partnership but signal neediness. Then they wonder why their efforts aren't working, why their results don't match their intentions. You now understand that the signal is the strategy. When you stabilize your internal state through enoughness, you send signals of sufficiency rather than scarcity. When you practice detachment, you communicate preference rather than desperation. When you embrace effortless action, you project competence rather than chaos. When you guard your sovereign attention, you demonstrate value rather than availability. When you operate from the chooser's frame, you signal selectivity rather than neediness. When you practice desire alchemy, you radiate abundance rather than lack. These signals compound over time. Each interaction reinforces your reputation. Each conversation builds trust. Each project demonstrates reliability. Your signal becomes your brand, and your brand becomes your magnet. The most successful people I know have mastered this signal management. They don't just do good work. They consistently emit the energy of someone who does good work. They don't just have good ideas. They radiate the presence of someone who thinks clearly. They don't just deliver results. They embody the calm confidence of someone who can be trusted with important outcomes. The integration effect. When you first started implementing these principles, they probably felt like separate techniques, distinct tools you could apply in specific situations. But as you've practiced them, something remarkable has happened. They've begun to integrate into a seamless way of being. Your enoughness baseline now supports your chooser's frame because you're not desperate for any particular outcome. Your sovereign attention amplifies your effortless action because you're focused on what matters most. Your desire alchemy feeds your option engine because you're creating value that attracts opportunities. Your detachment strengthens your boundaries because you're not afraid of disappointing people. This integration creates what I call the compound calm effect. Instead of having to remember which technique to use in which situation, you simply show up as someone who embodies all these principles naturally. Your presence becomes your power. Your being becomes your brand. Your character becomes your competitive advantage. People begin to seek you out not just for your skills, but for your energy. They want to be around someone who is calm under pressure, clear in communication, and confident in decision-making. They want to work with someone who has standards without arrogance, boundaries without coldness, and ambition without desperation. This magnetic quality becomes self-reinforcing. The better opportunities you attract, the more confident you become. The more confident you become, the better opportunities you attract. The calmer you remain under pressure, the more people trust you with pressure. The more people trust you, the calmer you feel in challenging situations. The relationship renaissance. Perhaps the most profound change you'll notice is in your relationships. When you stop needing things from people, you can finally start seeing them clearly. When you stop trying to manage their opinions of you, you can start appreciating them for who they are. When you stop performing for their approval, you can start connecting with their humanity. Your presence becomes a gift rather than a demand. People feel safe around you because they sense that you're not trying to extract anything from them. They feel seen by you because you're not distracted by your own needs. They feel valued by you because you're giving attention rather than seeking it. Conflicts resolve more quickly because you're not defending your ego. Conversations go deeper because you're not managing impressions. Trust builds faster because your motives are transparent. You're not trying to get something from the relationship, you're trying to bring something to it. This shift transforms every area of your life. Your romantic relationships become more intimate because you're not performing or pretending. Your friendships become more authentic because you're not keeping score. Your professional relationships become more productive because you're focused on mutual value rather than personal gain. Your network begins to feel like a living ecosystem rather than a collection of contacts. People introduce you to others because they trust your character. They refer opportunities to you because they know you'll handle them professionally. They seek your advice because they value your perspective. Your relationships become assets that appreciate over time rather than transactions that depreciate with use. The professional transformation. The changes in your professional life will be equally dramatic. You'll find yourself attracting premium opportunities without chasing them. People will begin inviting you to shape projects rather than just execute them. Your calendar will fill with work that energizes you rather than drains you. This happens because your entire approach to business development has transformed. Instead of pitching your way into rooms, you're building your way into conversations. Instead of convincing people to hire you, you're creating value that makes hiring you obvious. Instead of competing on price, you're competing on insight, reliability, and results. Your pricing conversations become easier because you're not attached to any particular outcome. You can walk away from projects that don't align with your standards, which paradoxically makes people more willing to meet your standards. You can take time to think through proposals because you're not desperate for immediate decisions. Your project delivery improves because you're working from calm rather than chaos. You make better decisions because you're not clouded by anxiety. You communicate more clearly because you're not managing multiple agendas. You deliver higher quality work because you have the bandwidth to think strategically rather than just tactically. Your reputation begins to precede you. People start recommending you before you ask. Opportunities arrive through warm introductions rather than cold outreach. Your past clients become your best business development team because they've experienced the difference between working with someone who is calm and confident versus someone who is stressed and needy. The compound returns. The most remarkable aspect of this transformation is how it accelerates over time. In the beginning, implementing these principles requires conscious effort. You have to remember to practice detachment during difficult conversations. You have to deliberately protect your sovereign attention from distractions. You have to consciously choose creation over consumption. But as these practices become habits, they require less conscious effort. Your new way of being becomes automatic. Your calm presence becomes your default state. Your clear boundaries become second nature. Your generous spirit becomes effortless. This is when the compound returns really begin to accelerate. Your reputation spreads organically because people naturally talk about professionals who are different from the norm. Your opportunities multiply because each successful project leads to referrals and recommendations. Your confidence grows because you have evidence that this approach actually works. The timeline varies for different people, but the pattern is consistent. In the first month, you notice changes in your internal state, less anxiety, clearer thinking, better decision-making. In the first quarter, you notice changes in how others respond to you, more respect, better opportunities, deeper conversations. In the first year, you notice changes in your results, higher income, better relationships, more meaningful work. But the real magic happens in years 2 and 3, when these principles have become so integrated into your identity that you can't imagine operating any other way. This is when people start describing you as naturally confident or effortlessly successful, not realizing the deliberate practice that created these qualities. Your next chapter starts now. You stand at a threshold. Behind you is the old way of operating, the chasing, the grasping, the constant need for external validation. Ahead of you is a new way of being, calm, centered, and magnetic. The choice is yours, and you make it fresh every day. The first step is simple but profound. Write down your 5 non-negotiables. These are your standards for scope, pricing, behavior, timeline, and communication. Make them clear, specific, and non-negotiable. Post them where you'll see them when making decisions. These standards will become your North Star when opportunities arise and pressure mounts. The second step is to schedule your first create block for tomorrow morning. Protect 45 minutes for deep work, creative thinking, or asset building. Stage the first 10 minutes tonight so you can begin immediately. Decide what you'll ship: a brief insight, a useful template, a thoughtful analysis. Keep it small but valuable. The third step is to ship 1 micro asset today. Don't wait until you have something perfect. Create something useful right now. A quick tip, a brief observation, a simple framework. Publish it without chasing reactions. Log it as the first entry in your creation streak. These 3 actions will set everything in motion. Your standards will begin attracting aligned opportunities while filtering out misaligned ones. Your create block will start building the assets that become your magnet. Your daily shipping will establish the rhythm that compounds into reputation. The magnet you are meant to be. Here's what I want you to understand as you close this book and begin this new chapter of your life. You were never meant to chase. You were meant to create. You were never meant to beg for opportunities. You were meant to build assets that attract them. You were never meant to prove your worth to others. You were meant to know your worth so deeply that others can't help but recognize it. The person you're becoming, calm under pressure, clear in communication, confident in decision-making, this isn't a performance or a technique. This is who you actually are when you're not clouded by neediness, scattered by distraction, or driven by desperation. This is your natural state when you're not trying to be someone else. You are the room people want to enter. You are the signal others rally around. You are the calm in the storm, the clarity in the chaos, the steady presence that others seek out when things get difficult. You don't need to convince anyone of this. You just need to embody it. The world is waiting for what you have to offer. Not the desperate, grasping, needy version of your gifts, but the calm, confident, generous expression of your unique value. The market is hungry for professionals who can deliver results without drama, who can handle pressure without panic, who can build relationships without keeping score. You now have the tools, the understanding, and the framework to become that person. The only question is whether you'll use them, whether you'll choose calm over clamor, creation over consumption, abundance over scarcity, whether you'll stop chasing and start becoming the magnet you were always meant to be. The choice is yours. The time is now. The world is waiting. Stop chasing. Start creating. Become the magnet. Your new life begins today.